Well, welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. My name is Peter Motavalli. I am a professor at the University of Missouri. My area is soil science and environmental science. I'm also the MU CIRTL leader. And this is part of a CIRTL cast that we're doing throughout February, looking at innovative methods to integrate writing assignments in the STEM classroom. And Amy Lannon, who made the presentation last week, is going to be helping me a little bit. And then in the moderation of this CIRTL cast, and then Robin Greenler is also going to help with some of the technical issues and introduce you to CIRTL. So the title of my talk today is Improving Student Science Writing Through Creative Assignments, Incorporating Diverse Audiences and Media. So before we begin, I think Robin wanted to give a few pointers and talk about CIRTL. So Robin, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thanks, Peter. Yeah, my name is Robin Greenler. It's great to see you all here today for the second CIRTL cast in our February series on academic writing. These CIRTL casts are supported by CIRTL, the Center for the Integration of Research, Teaching, and Learning, which is a network of universities around the country that are supporting graduate students and postdocs who are in STEM fields, in the science, technology, engineering, math fields, to develop their teaching skills so that they can develop careers as both researchers and as teachers. We have a lot of programming in CIRTL, as you can see. There's all sorts of things. Most of these are available online, and many of them are synchronous online. Events, journal clubs, courses. We have semester-long courses, workshops, there's summer institutes. There's a lot of things, and so I'd encourage you at some point to scoot on over to www.cirtl.net, and you can see some of the things that are going on. And then I also, yeah, you can check that out at our website. So it's great to see so many of you here. And what I'd like to do is ask if you would just type your name and your institution into the chat room so we can have some sense of who all is in the room. So it's not just quite an anonymous talking head here once Peter starts. And I know
where is that chat room, Robin?
So in the bottom left there is the chat window. And there we go. We can see people starting. We have somebody from Indiana University, Bloomington, Oregon State University, San Diego, Johns Hopkins, from K-State, that Kansas, University of Delaware, Emory, Georgia. Great, Amherst, Missouri. It's good to see you all here, and thanks for joining. It's great to see the range across the country. When we go through this session, I know Peter will at some point be asking you to engage and interact and ask questions. And so let me just show you briefly, if you haven't been on the Blackboard Collaborate platform before, briefly some sense of how to do that. If you have a question, the easiest way to do that is to raise your hand, which is this third icon on the row of 4 icons underneath your name. And that will let us know that you have a question. And then you can just click once on your talk button, and that turns it on with a little blue microphone. And you can ask your question. And we ask when you're done to click it again and turn it off. And similarly, if you want to put your video camera on, the same thing with the video button. So that's the easiest way to ask a question. But you can also are welcome to put a question or comment into the chat window, and we do encourage you to. If you have comments or you have a resource that's relevant or questions, please do pop that into the chat window. We'd love to see that. I don't know if we're going to have any polls in this session. I don't think we are. And then if there is an opportunity at times to type on the whiteboard, if you look at that vertical column of icons, it's just to the left of the whiteboard. The fourth one down here with the little A on it. If you click on that and then click on the whiteboard, you can type comments. And I don't know if Peter's going to have us do some of that, but that's another way.
Oh, I'm planning on it.
Excellent. So take note. There's the way we want to use the whiteboard. So with that, we're really fortunate to have Dr. Motavalli and Dr. Lannon here today, and I'm going to pass it back to you, Peter.
Well, thank you very much. It's really a great opportunity to talk with you, and I appreciate this, you spending the time. I wanted to share some of my experience and philosophy, and also caution that there's no real prescription here. This basically, my objective is really to stimulate your own thinking, maybe spark that your own creativity. So I'm going to talk about a bunch of different things that I think are important relating to writing assignments, and putting them in perspective, giving you some examples, and then talking a little bit about how you plan those. One of the things that I encourage you to do when you are working on developing your writing assignments is to place them into the scholarship of teaching and learning process. And I think that's pretty critical, because when you do that, you go through a series of steps that will help you in refining and getting feedback on the impacts and benefits of your creative writing assignment. And also, it also helps in terms of your own scholarship. I view that there's really a lot of changes that are going on in terms of writing needs, and so much of my efforts were to try and address many of those needs, including the rise of new media and how important those are in science. So you're going to see some mention of that. The traditional approaches, many of these, most of you are not doing, but when I started, there was very limited opportunities for students in the science areas and STEM fields to do writing of different styles and for different groups. And so this was one of the reasons I got involved with this. Very important in developing writing assignments is thinking about the objectives, what you're trying to do with it. And when I develop mine, I have multiple objectives, and so I want to suggest some of those when you're considering developing your own. I'm going to give examples of this process of developing them, and sort of stress too that much of this takes time, and then you can come up with a pretty effective assignment. And then I'll talk about where we put writing assignments and how the timing of it in the course. There's lots of considerations there. For me, one of the big ones is starting with informal writing assignments and then moving to more formal writing. So that's a part that I try and develop over time. And then what we're going to do is sort of open this up and talk about your own ideas, and feel this is one of those spin-free zones where you can be unfettered and come up with your own ideas. And then in the end, I've just put some references. Later on, you might want to look at those. These are from my own scholarship of teaching and learning, so you might be interested in looking at that for more information. Okay, well, the big thing here, and I know most of you are familiar with this scholarship of teaching and learning process, but I just want to give you an example of how I went through that when I started, which is many years ago now. I started in 1990 here at the University of Missouri, but before that I was at the University of Guam, which was really a totally different environment. And in that environment, I also went through this process. So I think it's really important. I encourage you to do that when you're developing your own writing assignments. What helped me and informed me in the directions of my writing assignments was first to really investigate what the problems were. And so I worked in collaboration with the University of Missouri Campus Writing Program, and we put out surveys of alumni, both science majors and non-science majors, about the importance of writing in their careers. And we also went to environmental science and soil science students and asked them about their exposure to writing and experiences. really found was that writing is pretty important in most of these fields for professional success, and also that the students we were training had very limited science writing experience. So this is where I then was able to sort of look at what direction I was going to go to. By the way, I think it's also very important is to look for those kind of collaborators and resources that would be important for your success. And one of the centers of excellence here at University of Missouri is this campus writing program, as well as the investment in teaching with technology. So I identified that early on, and that's why much of what I did has gone through those centers of excellence. The other thing which I had very little experience with, being mostly in science area, was the literature about science writing. I had my own biases, but I hadn't really delved into the literature about it, focusing on it. And so this provided me an opportunity of examining some of that and becoming acquainted with some of the terminology and some of the analytical methods, and especially the evaluation processes, because that was one I really have very little information on. So we then need to design the study. So in this case is coming up with different writing assignments, but having it so that we can test to see whether it works in a very sort of research-oriented way. And also very important to that is to assess that and have instruments, both quantitative and qualitative evaluations, which help to then see what the impact of the writing assignment is, get some suggestions for improvement. And then in my case, I think it was very important to do this over many semesters because every class seems to be different, and it provided me with a better understanding over multiple times. The other thing that's a very important part of the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning is public dissemination of feedback. So on our campus, for example, there are lots of different forums for presenting this work, and I did that extensively. And then also published much of this, and then got peer review from that, which helped me to also identify issues and refinements, and also to figure out what I was going to do in the future. And based on all of that, you can refine your assignment and then basically improve the effectiveness of your teaching practices. So this process, I'm very firmly convinced, is an important one, and it really helps to develop an improved writing assignment. Now, one thing that I realized when I started was that science writing needs are really changing. And for our graduate students, our undergraduate students, they need to have well-developed technical writing skills, and they need to be able to write in different styles and for diverse audiences, including in these new media areas. And I don't know how many of you, if you analyze what you do during the day, I must spend a lot of time on emails, and growing in importance are presence on things like Facebook, and of course we know the issue of Twitter these days. But when I talk to my students about impact, I point out, for example, how many people, how many users there are on Facebook. And I think right now there's almost 2 billion users of Facebook. And Twitter has maybe about 200, 300 million subscribers. And then I talk about my journal, Soil Science Society of America journal, and there's maybe about 2,000 people subscribing to that. So impact is really important, and for a science program, writing to be able to disseminate information, you need to have skills in writing both informally and formally. Now, the thing that I identified with being some problems was that there were limited opportunities for writing in different styles. So most of the students had focused on writing up laboratory reports and short answers on tests, but they hadn't done it in different media or for different audiences. And so to me, that was a shortcoming that I wanted to address. The issues that many of the assignments that students get, they may not be relevant or compelling to the student. So over time, and I admit that with my science area, environmental science, there's a lot of very compelling issues that students are very familiar with. But one of the things that I started to do early on was have those issues be ones that are on our campus. In fact, we did a whole bunch of work just focusing on the campus environmental issues. And I think this makes it more motivating for students because they see the relevance of it. The other big thing that I see, we're at universities or, different institutions, but there's a real value in looking at the audience for the writing assignment, not just have it limited to the teacher or just the students in the same classroom. In my mind, why can't students be doing writing assignments for audiences outside of the classroom? For example, why not write for students in a different classroom and have them have feedback? Or have students write for other students in another university, maybe even in another university in a different country. So I think it's not very motivating when your audience is the teacher and you're writing to the teacher. So to me, that was very important, is to try and develop those audiences and make them relevant issues. The other aspect of this, which is I think important, is often these assignments don't promote engagement with other disciplines. So for example, why not? Because, for example, at the University of Missouri, we have a very strong journalism program. Why not work with students in journalism and the fine arts, for example, and have them be part of the assignment? So again, having this wider audience, more participants in the assignment, I think is more motivating and probably better in terms of preparing professionals for what they're going to need to do in their jobs. The other aspect, which I think is also not very motivating, is that most of the products of these assignments, they don't have an impact or a lasting legacy. So the student writes it, put a lot of effort into it, and then it ends up in the file drawer of the teacher. Why not have it have some impact longer than the class? Can it be archived in some place where future classes can reference it and build upon it? Or make it so that it's a product that can go somewhere and be used. So these are the kind of things that I thought were quite critical. I'm just going to go back. Let me just go back to that because I want to get your comments about other problems that you might see with this traditional approach. Most of you are at different institutions and you've observed the writing assignments that are in STEM fields. What are some of the issues that you see with some of those assignments? So please go ahead and put your comments in the chat window. Now, many times the assignment is basically only useful for the class. It doesn't have a life beyond that. So focus more on the content and not the actual writing, not looking at improvement over the semester. Yeah, that's also, Rainier is saying that the skill one learns is also a product. I agree with that totally. Not enough time for editing and revising. That often is an issue that we see in many cases, so that the student can't reflect and improve their writing, which is a process which is very common in science. And so that getting used to even seeing editing and using that as a tool to improve your writing, I think, and learning it's a process is very important. These are all good suggestions related to some of the issues that we see with the traditional approaches that are being used. So one of the things that we often see is that there may be multiple objectives of writing assignments. And I don't know, I was thinking of Rachel Carson when I was writing this, because I saw a documentary about her, and she had a lot of, went through a very long process of looking at what her objectives were. And I think it was interesting, the whole process. And so that she's a really good role model, I think, in terms of writing assignments and what kind of process needs to be there. So you can have multiple objectives, and I'm just going to mention some of the ones that I include in my work assignments. Introduction of the key scientific concepts and their application. So very often it's to try and understand some of those concepts and how they apply to a real life situation. Of course, a very important part of this, and that's what Rainier was talking about, was improved communication skills. And notice I don't just talk about writing, because I think in many cases there's a lot of media there that the students need to be exposed to. I often do surveys in my class, especially at the beginning, to find out what kind of skills students have in things like web authoring and other media. And many of them, although they use these materials, haven't learned how to create them. And I think that's a shame that the students don't get exposed to be able to make their own creative process. The other thing that's often there is the learning to synthesize and integrate complex concepts and situations. So how do we do that? Writing, of course, and Amy had mentioned this last week about the writing to learn and learning to write. These are really critical parts of why we do writing for that purpose. The one that Rainier is going to talk about a lot next week is this editing and revision skills. And I think that's a very important skill to have as well. And maybe when there aren't revision opportunities, you don't really learn that. There's self-editing, but also editing others. And so that's an important part of a classroom assignment that could be added, is editing other people's work, and then going through that process of revision. The one that I think is really important that often is lacking is an empathy for an audience. So it's like learning Latin, that basically it's a dead language and there's no one who speaks it. And so if you're writing for, an audience that you don't know who it is and can't visualize who it is and don't understand what they're going through, then your writing is not going to be well targeted for that audience. And so this, I think, is a really important part of the objectives. Well, I wanted to see if anyone had anything to add to that. And, you can hit the talk button if there was some other things that you see. One other point I just wanted to make is that I often put in my writing assignments also a formatting that is required, because I think it's really important that students follow formats, because we know, for example, when you write a proposal, that you need to follow the format that you include, that is included in the proposal. So I often put that in there as well. So anyone have any comments about this objectives of writing assignments? Are there other objectives that you see that are really important that I possibly left out?
And Peter, I'll jump in here. Hi there.
Okay.
One of the things that I think is through several of your objectives is the importance of also giving a public voice about scientific issues, and so encouraging students to enter into being part of the public scholarship, civic engagement kind of approach.
Okay, I think that's very, very valid. Others, what other people have some suggestions on some other objectives in these writing assignments that were, I know last week we talked about some of the characteristics of the writing assignments that you felt were compelling and important, but what would be some objectives that we might want to have in there?
Hi. I wanted to comment that I think when I was reading one of your objectives about editing and revision skills, I think that's important too, because as we talked in the previous class, when when you start to promote like the students to review each other's assignments, or even when the teacher is reviewing it, they need to also learn to accept criticism, because sometimes they think they write so well, and then like, how can my colleague be saying this about my writing? And this promotes them to be able to say, okay, maybe it's not that good, maybe I have a lot more to learn, and that's okay. I just need to be humble, right? I think that's one big objective, and I think I faced that when I was a student, so I think it's important.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. I often bring in some reviewer comments from some of my own writing, scorching types of reviews, because I want them to realize that everyone goes through this, and it's part of the process, and you can't have too thin of a skin. You have to be proud of your writing, but you've got to realize that in the end, after you get review editing, that often the end product is better.
Yes.
Any other comments about objectives that you wanted to add?
I just want to say this was really good what you just said, that you share peer reviews that you have received yourself. I do that also. I don't think too many colleagues are doing this because, there's a certain, nobody wants to show that they've been criticized. But I think this is very important because we want to get better by way of criticism. And so I commend you for doing that. This is really excellent. I hope more people will do that.
Well, thank you. Anyone else who wanted to add something here? Okay, I'm gonna move on because there's a fair amount here I wanted to present. Okay, let's just move on here. Okay, so I wanted to give an example of a writing assignment just to sort of stimulate your own thoughts and just sort of impress upon you a little bit in terms of how this is a fairly long road to go. At least for me it was, because really think about this as your teaching research career. You're going to do your scholarship of teaching and learning. So you're over the whole period of time, you're going to be going through that whole scholarship of teaching and learning process. So starting in 2004, I teach a course in soil fertility, and one of the important things in this area is that they know how to write for public audiences. And of course, part of the land grant mission is extension, so disseminating information out to the public. And so the idea here was that the students would write an extension document on the importance and management of a plant nutrient. Every year I've changed the topic. And basically what I thought was who could be their target audience? And one of the ideas here is that why not have the extension document be for our students in our large class, which is our introductory soils course. So the students, each one of them wrote an extension document, and they worked in groups on specific areas and assembled their publication. And I put this up on the web. So I used Blackboard, and put this all together and included a survey, an evaluation survey, that the introductory soil students could enter their comments about each of the writings. So they were then able to, and the survey had questions in it related to the writing, both the content and the actual writing itself. And the students in the course, they were assigned to read the text and complete the evaluations. And then I compiled all those evaluations and then gave them back to the original student author. And so within the whole, during the course, then they were able to get back some feedback from their target audience and then be able to revise their writing. And so this is an example where the audience is outside of the classroom. And what was very interesting about this in the evaluations I did, both of the introductory soil students and the students in my upper level class, was that many of them, first off, many of them were a little bit apprehensive about exposing their writing to the introductory soil students. And also, many of them were quite interested in informal communications between the introductory and the upper level class and vice versa. So I found that quite interesting. There was also some challenges in terms of getting this all done in time, over the course of the semester, and also having the introductory soil students have enough information to be able to evaluate what they were reading. But over time, this is all morphed into various forms. And so we started out where I was creating this website in Blackboard to where the students were creating the website themselves in a wiki. So we did that for a little while. And then they also have done publications, hard copy publications, which have gone to various audiences, including the Missouri National Guard was stationed in Afghanistan, and they were tasked to do agricultural development. And one of them, who I knew, asked me if we could get some materials for them, which they could use. And so I had my class do this extension document, and we then forwarded it on to them, and they gave us some feedback on its usefulness. And now what we're doing is these Powtoon videos. So students are developing the scripts for them, and then they put together these videos, which are all based on, for the audience, extension audience. And we've talked to the extension director here about having a student extension site where this material could go up, and the extension agents, specialists, would then give some feedback to the students. So in other words, here we are taking ourselves out of the classroom, giving them some real audiences, and getting some feedback from them, which I think in my evaluations has made it a lot more stimulating for them to do the writing. And what we do with all of these is we've been archiving them. So they're on the Blackboard site, and then the next year's students can then use them as references. So here we again have that idea of a legacy, which then the students can, it's not just for one year. So any comments about that? If you want to put that in the chat room, please go ahead. Or even talk about it. It's fine with me. It's just kind of something that's developed over time. It's changed over time in response to the evaluations that were there, the feedback that I've received, my own interest as well in trying to do something different each time. So that's how these writing assignments have developed.
So Peter, I was going to ask, again, this is Amy, with the various things you have been displayed on the screen, will people have access to some of those, either to the website, either the videos or any of the other publications?
I have published this, and I have the reference in the back of this presentation. There is a challenge, and I will talk about that, but there are some challenges, that we have to face, and one of them is FERPA, and so student work, is confidential, and so the material that I've released, has been through the students actually voluntarily releasing it. So some of this is available because they've agreed to that, and I can provide those to people who would like that, to see that. I think probably the best place to start would be that publication. Any other comments, questions, reflections?
I want to comment that when you mentioned the Wikipedia, I don't know if it's exactly the experience that I had, but I had an experience where the coordinator of a biolab that I was an instructor at assigned for students to write a wiki page about some scientific subject that they were choosing. Mm-hmm. And it was very challenging because it's like, what do you put in a wiki page? It's not a scientific report. And so I had to learn and also, mentor them on how to do that. And I thought it's a nice format, and I thought it was an interesting experience.
Yes, and I think in almost all these cases, I'm giving technical documents to help navigate this electronic part of it. And so, and I'm, again, one of the things that we've talked about last time was scaffolding. So you have to go through steps to make sure that you're not losing people along the way, either due to some technical issue or they're confused or what have you. So you've got to do steps. One of the steps I find very useful is to at least have them do an outline so that, they're already starting to work on the topic and figuring out the logic of their presentation. So that helps.
Yeah, because it's not just, they need to learn more than just how to write and what format and what is the proper word, or if it's formal or informal, but also the technical part, right?
The technical part is in there as well, yeah.
Yeah. And nowadays we don't live without it, right?
That's exactly right. Okay, well, you might want to think a little bit about some of this. Now, I wanted to talk about another, This is an example of some of the feedback that the students gave for the extension pieces, and I was very concerned that there might be some negative feedback that would be sort of destructive and not constructive. But throughout the time I've done this, the students have been very good about being constructive in their comments, and I also coach them a little bit about making sure that they do that. So that's something that's going to be very important, so it doesn't end up being, something very, very critical in a negative way. So this is an important part of it. But in general, they were very sound comments, ones that I thought were very constructive. The next one I wanted to talk a little bit about is a popular article assignment that I developed. So about 2000, I have a course in soils in the environment, it's called, and I wanted students to have the opportunity to write in a journalistic style as part of their the different styles that they're exposed to. And many of them had not had an opportunity to publish their writing. So in general, the target audience for this assignment was the public, they were to pick an interesting environmental issue and write about it. And these writings were then edited and revised by the students, and then they're published. What we did in this case was we engaged graduate students from the MU Science Journalism program, and also students from our agricultural journalism. There's a course on web design that we got students from that because they are looking for projects. And so we got them involved as well in developing a publication. So there was not a publication that was readily available, so we had to create one, and we wanted to do that by students working on it. So originally, this one was the first illegal dumping near our caves was one that I produced. And then this one that says multidisciplinary input, that was from the students. The picture there is of a graduate student in the science journalism program, and she edited the whole thing. The campus writing program started an undergraduate writing journal called Artifacts, and they take student submissions and they go through a process of editing and feedback to the students. And so my students then, ones that are interested in doing this, they'll submit to this Artifacts. And I must say that many of my students have won. We've had a competition that the campus writing program has held, and many of my students have gotten very successful in that writing competition. Initially, we also had specific publications just devoted to environmental issues. And so this is a chance for the student to get an actual publication they can put on their CV. They get to see this in a publication, which I think is very motivating. Again, we also have evaluated this and written up on this whole thing. And so I think it's gone to a situation which I'm very happy about doing this because I think the students get a lot out of it. They learn a lot about writing in a popular way, in a journalistic style. So we give cash prizes, and of course that's very much motivating. Any questions or comments about this assignment? You can put that in the chat room if you'd like. Robin, you've got a question?
Yeah, I was just going to comment that the times when it seems like this is a good example when you can fold into this, the students come out with a product that they can use on a CV or in a portfolio, seems like also a real plus. You know, and whether that's contributing to a Wikipedia article or this kind of thing, it seems like that's also a real motivator and a win-win.
Yeah, they're not just writing to me. That's what we're trying to avoid. The audience is broader, it's more diverse. There's a legacy to their writing which will live on. Of course, Artifacts they have this archive, and so many of them, to them, it's then something that I think is a greater motivator, and that comes out in my assessments of this whole exercise as well. And certainly this has to be done in conjunction with others. You have to, the campus writing program here has been very supportive of this, and it's also investing heavily in having Artifacts. So I think that's been very good. Okay, why don't we move on, because we're getting near the end here, but I just wanted to show you a little bit about how you might want to look at how you sequence your writing assignments over the course of your own course. So a lot of what I do is I'm going from informal writing assignments to formal writing assignments. And so part of my thinking there is that, again, exposure for the students for informal writing, for different media, as well as sort of warming them up and breaking the ice of writing. And so the early parts of the course, they're going to do things. In this case, this is in my Soils and Environment course, they do an elevator pitch video. They've got to write it up. And it's a very short video on the most important environmental issue on our campus. They learn about how to do videos and how to write for video. And I give them an audience for this. And it's been very interesting how this has been something that students really like to do, because they don't get, you would think in this day and age with smartphones, that they would have had all sorts of video experience, but most of them have not. And so this is, I think, a really great way for them to learn about this form of media and writing for this form of media. The other one that I think has also been, is more informal, but it can be also quite formal, is a web blog that they do on an environmental issue. What's great about this is we use the discussion board in Blackboard, and I can get students from other universities involved. So they can be guests. They can also put up blogs. We've had a lot of discussion about things like lead mining in Peru and in Missouri. So I've had students from Peruvian university that I had some contacts with in discussing this issue, which they also have as a problem. And so they get these real life issues that I think is very motivating. And then we start doing things with different media. So again, I got them developing a campus environmental tour. They use Google Maps for that. They make up their own map, which has different media in it. Of course, they have to write for that. Then the popular article that I've already mentioned. Again, this is a little more formal. Then I start getting into the more formal types of writing with the proposal. I'm trying to push people learning more about environmental technology and intellectual property rights. And then lastly, I have them do really formal paper, but in the context of them putting in a position paper for the director of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. So again, this is going from the more informal to formal. So I also scaffold the assignments. We need to have, what I'm trying to do is allow time for feedback. So this is one of the challenges here. The ones that require more time, I usually start at the beginning. And also, I'm very mindful of FERPA regulations. And so that's one of the things that we've got to be very careful about. Okay, why don't I move on, because I do want to make sure that, so one of the things I wanted to do at the end here is just give you some opportunity to put out here on this whiteboard some of your own creative ideas for writing assignments that you would like to pursue, and maybe sort of just let yourself go and come up with some ideas. Jennifer, I see that you have your hand up. What was something you wanted to say?
Hi. I was wondering what type of course these assignments were used for. Was it a specific science writing course, or was it some other kind of course?
I have a course. The Soils and the Environment course is really an environmental science course. It's a writing intensive course. So there are, as part of our campus writing program, in requirements for students, they have to do 2 writing intensive courses. It includes requirements for the number of pages of writing that they have to do, as well as them going through revision, editing and revision. So revision is a very important part of that writing intensive requirement. And then the other one is a course that's not writing intensive. It's a soil fertility course, mostly with students from agricultural disciplines. they're both undergraduates primarily in the composition of the classes. Okay, please go ahead and put up some ideas that you have for writing assignments. The sky's the limit here. I mean, nothing is too crazy. That's a great one. And you know, this one here about the Campus Climate Action Plan. We have a very, very active component in here at our university. Students have invested in it, in which they're focused on climate change issues. And so there's a lot of motivation. And that's one of the things. Try and, you know, capture some of that enthusiasm for these issues in your writing assignments. Food safety info sheets and articles. And if you can get feedback, I think that's really important, especially if you can get it from maybe a professional, you know, them giving some feedback among the students themselves who have some knowledge of this issue. And then if there's some way to get these up there so that they have a legacy, and then they can be, you can build on it. Elementary school textbook chapters. Now that's very ambitious, and I think that's great. Have them write accurate descriptions of science topics for their lay friends and family. Very challenging often, and one of those things that as professionals we're often asked to do, especially these days, explaining what you're working on and some of the issues. I think it's very important to be able to write in a way that lay audiences are able to understand it. Brochures, I think those are great. You know, they also on scientific tips for studying sleep. These are other things that, again, you're thinking of products, something that could be used. Think of the audience that they would be gearing those to, some of the ways that they could bring in a different communication. Write script for and record a podcast. It's a great idea. This is, again, in using the new media, which is modern scientists is really going to have to be able to know. I was thinking about having students compete in writing a pitch to the dean about a campus sustainability issue. Yeah, this is initiative. Yes, this is persuasive writing. I think that's a really important thing to learn how to do. And I tie that in then to the proposal writing assignment, because they have to be able to persuade someone to fund them. And so that's going to be something that's going to be useful for them in the end. Summarize a topic in a tweet. That's a great point, because sometimes it's harder to write a little bit than to write a lot. And so being able to condense something, and another way to do this is have them take a long writing and put it in an abstract. That can be very challenging, and a real art form that can be. I think I would be very challenged to do the tweet myself, but that's a great point. Calls for action, press releases regarding published manuscripts. That's, I think, very good. You know, taking research, again, that's that aspect of things that they probably will be needing to do, especially if they are working in extension or advocacy types of situations. And again, these are ones that maybe they find very useful in their professional careers. So this is all really great stuff, and ones that, I see posts like you see on Scientific American blogs. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Again, a way of being able to take information complex information, to be able to write about it in a clear and concise way. That can be very, very useful. Okay, I'm going to move on a little bit, so we've got a little bit of time here in the end here. I did have a thing here about obstacles, but I think we're going to, and yesterday, for example, I was just in a meeting and I was talking about this, and one of the chairs of programs got up and said, well, you know, the teaching part of it is, you know, people aren't going to, if they do the scholarship of teaching and learning, they're not going to get tenure, that they have to focus on the research. And my point is, yes, that research focus is very important, but we have a lot of faculty who have a fairly sizable teaching responsibility, and so that's going to be something that they need to focus on. And also, if you're going to distinguish yourself in terms of your dossier, then having teaching research, especially focused on writing, which is so critical, is going to be very important for you. Yeah, feel free to put things down. I think, you know, there's a lot of different obstacles. Oftentimes people say, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, I get too big a class to do some of these things. There's a lot of different obstacles, but as I said, I found a lot of support, both from the chair of our program, also on campus. There were a lot of programs that were very supportive of that. A lot interacting with people, for example, who are in the educational area or in other disciplines, really got me charged up on this. And I think when you follow this, you become a more effective teacher as well. And so that distinguishes you. And it certainly helps if there are awards and things like that that you've received because of your teaching scholarship. So a very important part of it. And if you can be innovative, you're going to stand out. And so doing something that's somewhat new, that's bringing people together, that has a product, I think is going to be quite important. Okay, I'm going to then go to these references. This is going to be here. So here's some references for you. And I think I'm going to then, Robin, did you want to end this with the evaluation? Oh, by the way, before we do that, I just want to say, please come next week. We're going to have a really interesting CIRTL cast related to scientific writing, to scientific authoring, teaching peer review and revision strategies that Rainier Glazer is going to do. And he has a lot of experience, a lot of very interesting viewpoints about this. So please stay tuned next week. Thank you all.
And if I could jump in too, Robin, real quickly, and thank you, Peter. That was great. And I wanted to comment on one of the questions posed about not feeling like you could teach writing if you weren't, you know, connected to somebody in literature or composition. And one of the things we find are some of the best teachers of writing are people that are coming out of their content. So people like Peter. So please know that you know your content best. Therefore, you are one of the best people to help others learn how to communicate in that content.
Amen. Robin, go ahead.
Well, fantastic. Thank you. I want to thank you so much, Peter, for sharing this wealth of experience and perspectives. Really appreciate it. And I would ask if those of you who have attended today, if you could just go over to this link. We have a one-question survey, and it's very brief, but it's really helpful for us to know what kinds of things you'd like to see more of, what kinds of things are working for you, any suggestions you have. We just really like to know how we can make this programming fit your needs better. So if the survey link is there in the chat, and we'd appreciate that.